Next in our safety discussion, we're going to talk about anti-kickback pawls. They're P-A-W-L-S. Kind of a weird name, but it's these devices right here on the saw. I put a piece of paper up against the splitter so that you could see them a little bit better. Since everything's black, it's kind of hard for them to show up. So hopefully you can see them well. But it's a curved bar, and it's got these series of spikes on it. And the spikes are to help prevent kickback. As we already learned, when a kickback occurs, the board is going to go across the blade and backwards. From whatever side it starts on, it's going to go across the blade and back towards the operator. So the anti-kickback pawl is designed to prevent that from happening. So as the board moves past this anti-kickback pawl, it's going to slide under the pawl, the fingers there, and then each one of those little spikes is supposed to grab into the board and prevent the board from sliding backwards. Okay? I would say these things work anywhere from about 50% of the time to 80%, maybe even less sometimes, like 30 to 80%. You definitely cannot count on them to work every time. They are pretty good, they do work, but you can't count on them to grab the board. I've slid a lot of boards through testing them, and again, I would say probably 30 to 80% of the time they work, depending on how soft the wood is and the angle that you're cutting it, like how high the guard is and all that. So they're a nice piece of safety. They are not a guarantee, but they're one level in our multiple layers of protection. So the saw stop actually has a very nice feature. It has a second set of anti-kickback pawls way up here, and I've noticed these set actually work really well. Whereas the normal ones work okay, these tiny little ones, I found those work really well. And not many saws have those. I've only seen a couple saws that have both sets of the pawls on them, so it's probably still a pretty rare feature. But the design of these anti-kickback pawls is to grab the board and prevent it from kicking back. So even though the board wants to get kicked back, the pawl will hold it in place and resist that urge for the board to get kicked back. I have seen them grab and prevent kickbacks before, and in my experience, one of two things happens. It completely stops the board from being kicked back, or two, the board is resistant to the kickback and it gives you time to pull your hands out, and then the board gets fired off a little ways. So they're a good feature. They do work. They're a nice thing to have. I definitely would keep them in good shape on your saw. Sometimes the spikes will get kind of worn down, and just take a file to them and get them nice and sharp again. The sharper they are, the better they grab, but it's kind of a trade-off. If you get them too sharp, then they leave little lines in your project. So it's kind of a trade-off. You'll just get through experience how sharp to make them. But those are anti-kickback pawls, and they're going to prevent the board from getting kicked back. Now, before I start doing a few cuts on the table saw, I wanted to talk briefly about kickbacks. And kickbacks are something that occurs fairly regularly on the table saw. I think if you talk to anyone that's in a professional shop that's been there for more than a month or two, I think pretty much 100% of those people are going to tell you that they've experienced a kickback. They occur, and we try to avoid them. And the easiest ways to avoid them are to keep the workpiece up against the guides, both the table and the fence. And if you can do that, that'll prevent a lot of them. But I also wanted to talk about some of the more uncommon things that cause kickback too. And it's going to lead us into this idea of multiple layers of protection. Okay? And since we cannot guarantee that one of these bad things happens, we always want to have multiple layers of protection. That way, just in case one of our safeguards fails, another one is there to protect us. And I've never really heard another shop teacher talk about this, so I don't know if it's widely recognized or if people just assume it and they don't talk about it. But it's something that I think is very important. So we already learned that if a board comes away from the guide, that it could be sucked into the saw. And again, that's a fairly common occurrence. Even though as a professional, you are going to work day in and day out to prevent that, it's still going to happen. Remember reaction wood. you will never be able to tell reaction wood, and you'll just be cutting along and bang, the board will start to shift. It could do it slowly or it could do it very quickly, and that's called reaction wood. You can't see it when you're looking at a board. So unless you know the board already has that characteristic, you're going to be walking into it blind. Okay? So those are all common problems. But let's talk about some uncommon ones. So some of the more uncommon ones I've seen, fungus in the cut that makes it soft and porous so that you'll be cutting and all of a sudden your cut moves quickly. I've seen the opposite where you hit really dense parts of the wood. Sometimes you can tell, like if you see a knot, it's going to be dense. Sometimes you can't tell, and it's just in the grain structure of the wood. So hitting a real hard or soft spot can do it. If you hit a nail or any other embedded object in the wood that you don't know is there, barbed wire is a common one, nails, screws, staples, chainsaw blades even. All of these things can be hidden in a board and you don't see them. Okay, so those are a little more rare. And then there's also really rare stuff too. Imagine there was an active shooter at your school or at your workplace. Again, super rare, but that kind of stuff does happen. Somebody spills a drink behind you and you slip in it. We've had this one occur too. People walking around with a board on their shoulder or something, or a long board, and they turn and the board hits the person operating a tool. Okay, those kind of things can happen. Again, a lot more rare, but they are out there and you need to be aware of them. In addition to that, there's some ultra rare stuff. What about an earthquake? We live here in California, and while we've never had a very serious earthquake in class, if you've experienced them, it makes you very unsteady and it gives your brain, your equilibrium instantly goes away and you get unsteady and shaky. And so that can make your hands move. Another one is people that just get distracted. Your hands will go where your eyes go. So if I look to the left, my hands are going to go to the left. So these are all common. These are all things that happen too. They're more uncommon, but they still happen. Just to give you a little story, one of my classes, it was a wood shop. It was an advanced wood shop. It was the first period of the day. And we were in December. It was just a little before Christmas break. And it was dark outside. It was really overcast and it was early in the morning. So it was very dark outside. While we've had the power go out several times, I've never had it go out like this. Since everything else was so dark, the power in our shop went out and all of a sudden it plunged us instantly into darkness. So you can imagine how unsettling it is as you're pushing something through the table saw, bang, the power shuts off and you're instantly plunged into darkness. Okay, so again, these things are all go from, kind of rare to very rare, but you need to be aware of them because they do happen, and that is why these multiple layers of protection are so important. I'm going to show those as I make the cut, but I wanted to explain why we do those. You can never guarantee that something's not going to go wrong, and so you need these multiple layers to save you. In case something does go wrong, the other layers will step in and protect you. So that's going to conclude the portion of the discussion on the parts of the table saw and the safety features that the table saw has on it to keep you safe while using it. In the next part of the video, we're going to make some cuts, see how to do it safely, and what to look out for to make sure nothing bad goes wrong when you're using the table saw. And in the final portion, I'd like to show a kickback, show what a kickback looks like and why they are so dangerous and so scary.